All right, everybody, welcome to Clear Creek Golf Cars Leadership School. Today, we're joined by Mike Haynes. Mike is a retired pastor and retired director of missions from the Greene County Baptist Association in Springfield, Missouri. So, Mike, thank you for joining us today on the Leadership School. We're really excited to get to meet you and learn from you, but why don't you share with us a little bit of your background? How did you get started in churches and in leadership?
Well, sure, Trey. Be glad to. Well, I grew up in church, and as a young man, began to feel the Lord God leading me into a ministry situation, particularly a pastorate. And so I studied, of course, went to college and then seminary, and then after was youth minister at a couple of churches, and then after I graduated from seminary, my wife and I moved to Kansas City long time ago, where I pastored three different churches, a total of about 20, a little over 20 years. The last church I pastored was the First Baptist Church of North Kansas City. And from there, we were invited to be the director of the Baptist Association in the Springfield area, which while I was there grew to about 100 congregations. And we did a lot of different work internationally, as well as planting churches and a lot of pastor kind of work. That's really my main calling, is to encourage and help pastors in their role as leaders of their churches.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mike. So, in that, I mean, that's how I got to know you. Being when I was on staff at the church there in Springfield as a youth pastor, getting to know you that way and that role. So when I was looking at and thinking about, what are topics that we could, dive into to get to know and get to grow as leaders, I kind of thought back to my time there and then kind of my transition out, and just how you stepped in, you and Robbie stepped in for me and Abby to care for us as we were we were leaving the church and leaving that role. So I know from personal experience that you are so good at caring for leaders. So that's what I want us to focus on today. So
Sure.
just kind of kicking off from that perspective, what needs does a leader have that maybe is different from someone who's not in leadership?
Well, and of course, each situation is unique, but leaders obviously have as the point person for their organization or their business, or their team, or in my case their church or ministry. They have additional stress, and in fact, leadership is constant stress, because an effective leader really never is free from or released from just the stress, the pressure, which can be good, but at the same time, it's unrelenting, with responsibility for staff, responsibility for planning, and so many other elements. Of course, it's on the leader's shoulder typically to be the main problem solver. If the organization or business or church has difficulties, it's on the leader's shoulder to motivate the other staff or to confront staff that may not be performing up to measure. And so just so many additional elements that are on the leader's shoulder that your typical employee would not have, at least not have nearly to that degree or the constancy of it.
Yeah, and I know I've experienced that in just my limited leadership roles that, but then serving under those higher level leaders, you're right, especially coming out of going through the pandemic. That
Right.
how did how did you see a change in leaders? And I know pastors, for sure, but where did you see a change in and from the pandemic in needs of leaders?
Well, the pandemic, of course, was difficult, challenging for all of us, but especially for leaders. Initially, in our churches, and I know this was the case in businesses as well, leaders were very stressed over the financial viability of their organization or ministry. That was a huge concern. and how are we going to survive this financially when we're shut down for a period of time? And so many churches, like businesses, just operate on a shoestring. Small businesses, their success is dependent on just constant business. And so same with churches. If we don't have attenders or just call off church for a month or 3 months or whatever, so that was a challenge. But also churches and businesses responded well with the online, just like we're doing with this online interview. Churches responded immensely well. I was so proud of our churches in the Springfield area, learning how to use Zoom and YouTube and other means to communicate, do worship services, even visit people, over online, since we couldn't do a lot of things in person. So that's how a lot of leaders responded. But at the same time, to be frank, there were churches that didn't make it through the pandemic. They already may have been declining in attendance, an older congregation, and just didn't survive the pandemic. So that's tragic, but that's just the realistic situation, what happened.
Mhm.
But again, leaders, many leaders responded exceptionally well. Some not so well, but I saw a lot of leaders respond exceptionally well. One good thing about the pandemic for churches, I would say, Trey, is that pastors that really kind of were lone wolves in the sense that they just didn't get together with other pastors. They just focused on their church, didn't think too much about what other pastors were doing. The pandemic forced them to connect with other pastors,
Mm.
find out what other guys were doing and other churches were doing so they could learn and do the same themselves. And that was a definite good result of the pandemic.
Yeah, so let's kind of dovetail that into caring for leaders. So, um, when you see a leader hurting, and I think kind of that idea of leaders kind of coming together and encouraging each other. Share with us a bit about that. How, if you see a leader hurting or know, there's some personal or professional stuff going on, how
Right.
should a caring leader go about maybe being involved in that and helping them?
Yeah. And it's real easy for leaders. Again, whether you're in business or government or wherever, it's real easy for leaders to become isolated and lonely. It's leaders struggle with loneliness and other types of just, trying to deal with their problems on their own. And leaders need other leaders. Leaders need to connect with other leaders for learning, for support. Actually, I was with, just as one example, I was with where I'm serving as an interim pastor now. There's several pastors that get together regularly for lunch. And I was with these guys just last week. And one of the things they did just around the lunch table at one of these fellows' churches was just talk about the struggles that each of them are facing, and just sharing with each other those challenges help the others. You could tell, in fact, they would say it helped them relax because they recognized, hey, I'm not in this alone. I'm not
Mm.
the only one having that problem. And so connecting leaders is critical. And as the director of our association, that was one of the primary things that I really worked on, was getting pastors, church leaders together to learn from each other, to support each other, just to be friends with each other as much as anything. And that helps greatly leaders be the best they can be. Another thing I would say, Trey, is I always challenge leaders to take care of themselves. Now, I mean that in the best sense, not selfishly take care of themselves, but take care of themselves so they can be their best for those that work for them, those that are under them. For a pastor to take care of himself means to, try to reduce stress, take a day off, and make sure you have plenty of time to do your sermon preparation so you can be good at that and do your best, as well as in meeting with your staff, be on top of it, not be stressed or whatever may be the situation. Pastors have a tendency to struggle with depression, and make sure that you don't let yourself fall into that kind of challenge. And So to take care of yourselves, leaders are so intense on taking care of others and their business or their church or whatever. Sometimes they don't do a good job of what we call self-care.
Yeah, and I've seen that in myself and then other leaders I've been. Yeah, you're very
Yep.
right about that. So what, as a leader who is caring for other leaders or have leaders either under them or around them, um, do you have any advice on things? So those are good things to do. Do you have any advice on things to like be aware of, to watch out for? Maybe some ways of what are some things not to do when you see a leader who needs help or who's hurting?
Sure. Well, I think just contact, just presence in churches, and this would be true in any relationship environment. And relationships are one of my favorite sayings is relationships are most important. I'm a very task-oriented kind of person, and if I'm not careful, I'll get so focused on my to-do list I'll just run over people and not really give attention to people's feelings or and that is not healthy for leaders and especially not healthy for those who are under leaders for leaders to get in that habit. So just your presence, attention is critical. And yeah, leaders need to be careful not to just make the task so important they forget the relationship. And trust is built. Trust is so critical. There's a very good saying that when you've got high trust, things move quickly. When there's low trust, things move slowly. And
Mm,
so in business environment as well, if the boss, if the leaders have a high level of trust, people could just know what to do and there's a high level of functioning. But if there's low trust, then everybody suspects or what's he mean by that? What did he say? When he said that, was he trying to say something to me hidden? I mean, there's all kinds
mm.
of problems. So building trust, taking time to build trust, and then just time together, working out to have some time together to talk and to get to know one another is so critical for leaders, and leaders working with other leaders, but leaders working with those who are under them as well.
Yeah.
You talked about how do you recognize it? Well, you know, people respond to stress differently or depression differently. Depression, a lot of times, comes out in anger. If you sense somebody is having maybe some anger issues or a short temper, that may mean really they're in depression or a lot of stress. Uh, One of the things I used to talk to pastors about, I'd ask real simple questions like, "Hey, are you getting enough sleep? Are you are you taking some time off? What are you doing for fun?" And that means not just sitting blank staring in front of a TV. What are you doing for true recreation, recreation? How are you recreating yourself to be the best you can be for your church as well as for your staff, for example?
Yeah, Mike, that's really good. So what do you, we'll dive a little more personally. What do you do for recreation when you are stressed or kind of under a lot of pressure? What are you doing to care not just for the leaders around you, but caring for yourself in that way?
Sure. Well, of course, now that I'm retired, that's changed some. But what I would traditionally do, I just over the years became very, very religious about taking a day off during the week. Of course, for ministers, Sunday is a work day. A lot of times there's Saturday responsibilities. So making sure to take some time off. I love to fish. I go fishing. I'm not in the Springfield area right now for a short while, but while I'm there, I get down to Roaring River regularly and do some trout fishing. And love to read, spend time reading. I like to walk. My wife and I love to travel, and so we've done several cruises. Just those kinds of things really do refresh me and recreate me, and just to try to make sure that you work some time in that is fun and that is truly does recreate you. There's a lot of things we can do with our time off that don't refresh us. And
Mm,
so that's one of the things that a leader needs to be self-aware. A leader needs to study themselves and know themselves and say, okay, what does really refresh me and recreate me? and make sure you spend time and money on that.
Yeah, that's really good. How many pounds of fish do you think you've caught while you've been in Kodiak this last time?
Oh, well, we just finished the silver salmon season, and I caught quite a few. Actually, had a friend come up for a couple of weeks, and he took a 50-pound box home, and then I actually came home. Robbie and I came back to Springfield for just a couple of weeks here back a few weeks ago in October, and we took about a 25-pound box home. So yeah, and we've got still a bunch in our freezer, so we've caught quite a few. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So Mike, in every organization, whether it's church, business, government, whatever it is, um, we're all people, so we struggle with things. Maybe you're hurt by something in our personal life. Maybe a professional relationship is damaged, or some sort of failing. So when you're working with leaders through that, and again, leaders under you or beside you or around you, how do you walk with them through a healing process?
Well, I think, again, just being a friend is someone that's maybe going through a difficult time, or maybe in a church setting, Trey, they've had a difficult time or maybe even lost a position. Just to be a friend is really the critical thing, and to spend time with that person, uh, when they're ready to talk about, okay, what is the Lord, this again from a Christian ministry perspective, but what is the Lord trying to teach you? Or we could just say more broadly, what have you learned through this? Lot of lot of business leaders, a lot of education leaders, government leaders will be the first to say that we learn through struggle and through failure. That's the
Mhm.
greatest teacher there is, quite frankly, quite literally. And so, what have we learned, and how can we grow, and then not get stuck? One of the things that is so concerning, this is true like even in any grief situation, whether you lose a loved one, or whether you go through a family tragedy or a work difficulty, to move past the grief that comes and then to go on to healing and wholeness. And so get people talking. That's important, to talk about what happened, and what struggles they had and how they're dealing with it, and including the whole family in the church setting. And this would be true, though, in any setting. In the church setting, particularly when there's a hurt or difficulty for leaders, for ministers particularly, it affects the whole family. How's the spouse doing? And so just getting people to talk about it and be their friend, that's probably the most important thing we can do. Back to that relationship piece.
Yeah, Karen is for somebody as a person and not just as their position.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. That's
that's
right.
good.
Yeah.
So, Mike, we'll kind of wrap up with this last one. What what mindset or what skill set should leaders look to? I know you've talked about relationship building, but are there any other mindsets or skill sets that, as leaders, we should be building in ourselves to be able to look to care for someone, or again to care for ourselves? What do we need to build in ourselves to do that?
Well, leaders, as I've already said, need to study themselves. Leaders need to be healthy enough to do some regular introspection. Where maybe do I need to grow? Where am I not as strong as I need to be? And then I think one of the absolute greatest things for a leader is to just be a growing person, to be a growing, learning person, and to think about, what do I need to be reading? With all the material online today, yeah, what videos do I need to be watching? With world events, even what do I need to learn and understand, and how might that impact? Like a business leader, I'm not a business leader, but I still have interest in AI. I don't know much about it, but I want to learn a little more about it. How's that going to impact my business? And just to be a growing, learning person, is critical for your own self and your own self development, but also for your business or your area where you lead and those who work for you, your employees or your staff. And if they know that you're a learning, growing person, then that lifts everybody. You know, the old saying about, you know, if the leader increases and grows and continues to move forward, that raises everyone to a higher standard and better performance.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time with us today, sharing your wisdom and your experience, and then just for your friendship with me and with Abby too, and the care you've shown us over the years. I thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome, and great to spend time with you, Trey.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So everybody, thank you for joining us. Another Clear Creek Golf Car Leadership School. We just hope you continue to engage and show care to the leaders around you. And again, just thanks for growing with us.